I'd now like to introduce our first speaker. He served Bradford in Parliament for 21 years and held office for Minister for Sport and Tourism. I'd like to introduce Gerry Sutcliffe.
Well, good evening, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be here. As Shiraz says, I'm Gerry Sutcliffe, one-time former has-been, retired MP. And the reason why I'm saying retired MP is because most MPs don't want to retire. They want to go on and on and on. And Enoch Powell, and the young people in the room won't know who Enoch Powell was. He was a Conservative MP many, many years ago. But he said, all political careers end in failure. And what he meant by that was people go on, and then ultimately they get voted out or they have to go. And unfortunately, David Cameron felt that this year, where he had to go because of what happened with the Brexit vote. So I can safely say that I retired when I wanted to retire, which was in 2015. And I have to say those 21 years in Westminster were fantastic. For somebody who left school at 16, I know that GCSEs have been announced today. I left school with 2 O-levels, one in English, one in history, and the teachers weren't sure how I did that. But I left school and then went to work at Brew Haus. Now again, for the non-Bradfordians, that was a big department store in the centre of Bradford. And I thought I was the bee's knees, you know, as a junior salesperson at Brew Haus, you know, working within that industry. And anybody who watched the TV series Grace Brothers will know exactly what I mean. I was the person the furthest away from the customer, because what they did was the senior sales got there first, then the next important person, and finally the junior got to serve if everybody else was busy. But great experience, because it was the first time I came across credit cards. Because if you were a Brew Haus customer, you had a credit card and you had an account. And you could take goods on approval. And what that meant was you could take them for 3 days, then bring them back, no questions asked. Now imagine being able to do that today. I'm not sure that we could. So I left Brew Haus. I went to work at the Telegraph and Argus, the newspaper in Bradford, and I did what they call display advertising. And there's some sheets out in front of you. And what that meant was placing the adverts within the editorial comment. And my job was to go up to the editor after the page had been planned, because remember, it was the advertising revenue that paid for the newspaper's income. But I had to go to the editor and say, this is the space that you've got left. And it was an old guy called Charlie Beach from Old School Editorial, and I had to run for my life to get out of the office each day. We gave him the page. Married at 19, kids on the way at 20, went to work then at a number of companies, Hepworth and Grandage in Bradford, and I finally finished up at Field Printers, Fields at Lidget Green, which was a great printing house, one of many in the city, because print was quite strong in our area. Got involved with the trade union, became a full-time officer of a union called SOGAT, the Society of Graphical and Allied Trades, and became a councillor here in Bradford in 1982. I am that old. A Clayton ward councillor in 1982. And I got on the council and they said to me, just have a couple of years of experience and then leave that, because trade unions and politics don't mix. And it's quite interesting as you come forward to today. But you know, it was, again, a great experience. Well, I ignored the advice, and I stopped on the council for 14 years, becoming the leader of the council in 1992. And in 1994, a tragedy happened. Bob Cryer, who was the previous MP in Bradford, unfortunately got killed in a car accident on his way to Westminster. And it was a real tragedy. Bob had been a long-term MP, well respected by all sides of politics, you know, a great speaker, a great orator, and a great MP. So I got elected in a by-election in June 1994. And I went down there to London. And I'd been to London a few times as a trade union official and things like that, but I hadn't really understood the place. And so you had to go down to live there. You know, you lived there from a Monday to a Thursday, came back at the weekends and did your constituency surgeries and all the things that you're expected to do. But I found it difficult. And the first 18 months, I found it really hard about, you know, what to do, because you wanted to represent to your best ability the people that you were there to represent, but you wanted to do the job as well. Now, I was lucky at that time because we were in opposition in 94, and of course it looked like we were going to get victory in 97, which we did. And we will all have our views on Tony Blair as Prime Minister, but I found him to be a great Prime Minister, and I was fortunate enough to have a job through all the years of his premiership and that of Gordon Brown. Two of the things I want to talk about tonight are devolution, decentralisation of power, and sport and politics and where we've been with the Olympics, which has been fantastic. But the reason why I'm explaining what I am is this is such a great country that people from humble backgrounds can achieve things. You can do anything you want. And I think that's true of business as well. I think if you set about what you want to achieve, however hard it is, but you have that drive and have that goal, you can achieve and you can do things. And I think there's nowhere better to do it in the north of England. And more of that in a moment. So, minister in various departments. I was the employment minister, I was the consumer minister, the competition minister, the minister for prisons. Now that was tough. I had to go around a few prisons. I had to go around Armley as my first visit. Went to Armley with the then governor of Armley Prison, who was 38. So this young governor, you know, wanting to show the new minister around, was really excited by the fact that I was there. Very discreet prison officer on either side as you're wandering around. First unlock, this guy says, "Hello, Gerry, how are you doing?" And it was a guy who lived in Queensbury. So the governor's looking at me. Next thing, we were walking down the swing, and this young lad said to me, he said, "Mr. Sutcliffe, can I speak to you?" I said, "Of course you can." He says, "How's your Craig and Adrian?" They're my two sons. I said, "They're fine." So I said, how do you know them? He said, "I used to play football at Queensbury Celtic with him." So he just showed us, "So what are you doing in here?" And he got involved in drugs and obviously that slippery slope. And I said, "Have you learnt your lesson?" He said, "Hopefully I have, and things will be okay." The governor stopped me at that point. He says, "I think we better stop here." He says, "You seem to know more people in here than I do." And I also learned about the civil service at that time, because the Director General of Prisons came into the office on the first day and he said, "Minister, you'll be pleased to know there's been no escapes from Category 1 prisons in the last 2 years." I said, "That's very good, excellent." I said, "What about all these that escape from these open prisons?" And you looked at me as though I was stupid. I said, "I don't understand what you mean." I said, "These open prisons seem to go in and out whenever they want to." He says, "Oh, you don't understand." He says, "You escape from a Category 1 prison, you abscond from an open prison." And that was the difference in the figures. And I said, "You'll do for me." You know. But at that time, when I first became a minister, my private office, and these are the people that look after you as a minister, to take you around, to do all the visits you've got to do, all the speeches, and all the things that you have to do over a period of time. I said, hands up, all of those have been to Bradford. Not one hand went up in that office. How many have been to Leeds or Yorkshire? And a few sort of hands went up, but not many. And I suddenly realised that the civil servants, nice people as they were, had no understanding of the wider country. They knew London and the South East, but they didn't know Yorkshire or the North or Lancashire or the North West. And that became evident when they tried to get me to move from different places. And Mick's here with me tonight, Mick Swales, who and I work together. We worked together for many years. They say, right, you can do a meeting in Leeds and you can be in Bradford in Newcastle in 3/4 of an hour. They thought it was that close. They thought our transport system was equal to that of the South East, where you can move around fairly quickly. So that really leads me on to where we are now in terms of the devolution and the issues facing Yorkshire and the Humber and facing the North. I have no doubt in my mind there is a great North-South divide. I am not a supporter of HS2. I think there's no reason for us to want to improve the time to go from north to south. I want to see an improvement of going from east to west and west to east. Anybody that's tried to get on a train to go from Bradford, Leeds to Manchester to Liverpool, wherever, it takes forever. And likewise to Hull and to Humberside. And those offices have gone in the north. The government offices in Leeds, in Newcastle, they've gone. They're no longer there. So before, as a MP or as a councillor, you'd be able to make a difference by getting in touch with the regional officer of government to tell them what was going on. We don't have that now. We had the Regional Development Agency, Yorkshire Forward, which I thought was great, and there were different views about how it operated or it didn't. But at least there was a voice for Yorkshire. We haven't got that voice anymore. We've got the local enterprise partnerships, which are good, but are not big enough. And so we do need a voice for Yorkshire in terms of our infrastructure, our investment, our transport, all the things that money needs to be spent on to improve the opportunities for business to be able to come in to Yorkshire and the Humber and to the north. And it's not rocket science. it has been done before. In 1993, when I was on the council, I was one of the board directors of the Yorkshire Homicide Development Agency, which is made up of councils, business, trade unions, a wide range of people who had an input into our region. And we need to do that again. We can't fall behind, because we are falling behind. Anybody that does business in the northwest with Manchester, with Liverpool, will see what's taking place there. Next year in Greater Manchester, which is the 12 local authorities in Manchester, there will be an elected mayor. It's likely to be my friend Andy Burnham, but he will become the mayor of Greater Manchester. In Merseyside, again, all the authorities in Merseyside, they will have a mayor, and that's likely to be a guy called Steve Rotherham, who will be the mayor there. There's discussions that are taking place in Warrington, in Cheshire, about how they should go about it. Now, we need to do the same in Yorkshire and the Humber. And if you think about brand Yorkshire, if you think about where we are in terms of 6.5 million people in the population, bigger than Scotland, why then haven't we got that infrastructure investment coming to us? Now, I know it's difficult for local politicians in terms of coming forward with these deals. When people talk about the Northern Powerhouse, not many people understand what it means. I'm not sure that I know what they mean by Northern Powerhouse. But if they mean investment, if they mean spending, making sure that we have an equal playing field, that we can have the investment that they have in the South East and elsewhere in the UK, then why not Yorkshire? We've already shown we can do it through Welcome to Yorkshire, through what happened with the Tour de France and all the positive things that companies in Yorkshire are doing. So I'm delighted that Susan's here tonight, and it's not all Susan's fault. Susan's been involved in these negotiations. But what we want to see is a solution. We want to make sure that we know what powers the region needs, and we need to make sure that our local authorities across the whole of Yorkshire work out what should happen. And I'm not saying tonight it should be any one of a range of things. I think that discussion's got to take place. But what we can't do, we can't wait. We can't go on another 2 years without anything happening. Brexit has happened, and people have voted whichever way they did, but there will be a consequence of that. And we need the region to be a strong place that has that ability to be able to determine what the route should be in terms of the involvement of infrastructure, so that we can get that inward investment. And they say it's already happening. Sheffield just done a deal with the Chinese. There's similar deals with other foreign investors right across the north. We need to continue to do that. We need to support the new industries, the new businesses that are setting up. We need to make sure that the youngsters that we've got can find employment, can find those jobs of the future. And a city like ours in Bradford, and I'm sure Susan will mention this, is the fastest growing young population, people that have the opportunity to learn the new industries, to learn the new roles that the country will need in times to come. So I hope that you can influence things by talking to people about devolution and why it needs to happen for Yorkshire and the Humber, and obviously for the whole of the north of England. Just a little bit on now on the Olympics and Paralympics. I'm sure most of you watched what went on and saw what happened. I had a fantastic time as the Minister for Sport from 2007 to 2010. It was a time when we just got the announcement that London was going to host the Games in 2012, and the excitement was paramount. But we knew that we had to continue investing in sport to make sure that not only did we have the infrastructure to host the Games in 2012, but that we had the athletes that could perform. And it all goes back to 1996, to the Atlanta Games in 1996, where we won one medal. John Major, as Prime Minister, had introduced the National Lottery, and a great deal of debt is due to him for introducing the National Lottery, because that meant that lottery funding could fund our athletes. So in '97, Tony Blair picked that up, and we funded our athletes through the National Lottery, through government funding, and through private sector and voluntary foundations funding as well, which meant that every one of our athletes, both Olympic and Paralympic, were full-time. And we had a no-compromise agreement, which said if you didn't and weren't able to medal at a Games, then that sport didn't get the funding. It only went to those that could. And we saw the benefit of that in the Games in Beijing in 2008. So 2007, I became Sports Minister. 2008, off to Beijing, thinking, wow, this is a great job. And saw the Bird's Nest Stadium, the Cube, and the variety of fantastic stadia that Chinese had organised. But if you remember there was a problem about crowds as well, about numbers who were turning up, particularly for the Paralympics. But I went to the holding camp in Macau just before the 2008 Olympics, and the team managers were saying to me, we're going to do the best ever. We're going to actually get to something like 47 medals. And of course, you know, I let that slip somewhere. The next thing, the Australian sports minister arrived at my hotel with a TV crew saying, we've heard you're going to win 47 medals. If you do that, that's going to beat us, and that's not going to happen. There's no way that the UK can beat Australia as far as medals are won. Within 15 minutes of that TV interview, there's a phone call from number 10. He said, are you sure about this? I said, I'm positive it'll be fine, don't worry about it. My teeth and my fingernails were for the whole of those games, but we did. We beat the Australians by 1 medal, and we were on our way. But it wasn't just about funding for Olympic and elite athletes, it was about community sport and school sport as well. Because the important thing was to make sure that if people were going to be inspired, that they could then achieve those different sports as and when they wanted to do that. In times gone by, if you're a girl, you played netball and hockey, and if you're a boy, you played football, rugby and cricket. And that was all that was on offer. So what we did was make sure that we widened the range of sports that people could play in school, out of school, in community and beyond. And the good news is that's now meant that we had wonderful games in London where all the tickets were sold out for both the Olympics and the Paralympics. And you know, obviously we come on to Rio where the team does better than any other previous Olympics. And we're on now to Tokyo next in terms of the athletes are coming through, the talent pools are coming through. We just need to watch that we keep the investment in community sport and we actually keep the investment in school sport. I'm saddened by what's happened in school sport over the last few years in terms of the money not being available to try and keep that momentum going. We have specialist sports colleges, we have coaches that go into schools, and we need to make sure we keep doing that to make sure that we're able to have that conveyor belt of athletes who can perform. And it is them that perform, them and their coaches, it's the dedication, the lifestyles that they have that achieve the things that they've done, and it is down to them. But it is that system that's in place now for our country, which means if we do it right, we can do that for years and years to come. And that helps us then in terms of our international reputation. It helps us when we go around the world, and John Grogan and I and others in the room go around the world, and people talk about the London Olympics, talk about the success of our Olympians and Paralympians. I'm just sad that Rio will not be a good Paralympics in the way that London was. They won't have the same crowds as we had in London. I mean, I was there for both the great events on the Saturday night in London for the Olympics, but also for the Paralympics when 80,000 people shouted Johnny Peacock's name out, you know, as he won, prepared to win that gold medal. So I want to say thank you very much to Yen for inviting me along this evening. Thank you for listening. And say to you all that it's important that we keep up these networks, particularly here in the north, making sure that we share our experiences, making sure that we share our business contacts and help each other as much as we can. Because not only do we help ourselves, but we help our region, we help our kids in terms of jobs and training and development. So long may Yen continue and the good work continue. So thank you very much for listening. Thank you.